I was the most precocious little girl. My parents never even had to tell me when to go to bed. Growing up in rural Iowa in the 90s, I was an average-sized kid whose favorite hobby was eating cookie dough sundaes with my mom. Then we'd laugh about how much we ate and how we needed to stop eating before we got fat. I constantly begged my parents for a sibling. I was ecstatic when they told me baby Alexander was on the way. Alexander was born with autism and epilepsy and required constant care. I learned to take care of myself so my parents wouldn't be burdened with my needs. I loved hearing my mom brag to her friends about how self-disciplined I was. By age 16, I'd graduated high school and started planning my courses at nearby Iowa State University. I yearned to be a magazine designer, combining my passions for writing and art. My mom bought me subscriptions to a bunch of magazines so I could study the editorial designs. In 17, I read about the dreaded freshman 15, a term describing the 15 pounds the average first-year college student gains. Just the thought of my mom's disapproving glances terrified me. Wow, she used to be so much thinner, I imagined my old friends would whisper. Then it hit me. I would lose 15 pounds before college so that when I gained the freshman 15, I'd be right back at the same weight I started. It was the perfect plan. I scoured my magazines for ab exercises that I could do daily, and I cut back on my cherished Sundays. By the time I started college, I'd lost about 10 pounds. At Iowa State, I found socializing with students 2 or 3 years older to be overwhelming. I wanted to be liked, but the pressure to be perfect to other people was just too much. So I stayed in my room, avoiding social activities. Overly conscious of the freshman 15, I limited my diet to fruits, vegetables, and grains, every calorie of which I recorded. One night, a group of dorm mates invited me to run from one side of campus to the other. I was a little lonely, so why not? I didn't hate it, so I ran by myself the next morning. Within a few weeks, I had made running my daily hobby. The college-level courses were much more time-consuming than I had anticipated, so my roommate suggested I visit the university counselor for time management tips. I reluctantly met with a short, squat lady who latched onto my eating habits as a problem immediately. After 6 weeks of evaluation, she showed me her clipboard, and on it a line with the left side labeled healthy and the right side as severe. My habits supposedly put me at borderline severe anorexia on the scale. But I didn't feel sick, maybe a little stressed. She was obviously just jealous. Who is she to nitpick my diet and exercising? I was proud for outsmarting the freshman 15 and kind of amused at seeing where I fell on the scale. My curiosity about what constituted severe anorexia caused me to stumble upon a few websites that actually encouraged women to restrict intake. There, I felt like I had found a family. I made myself a red bracelet symbolizing pro-ana, or pro-anorexia, and every time I looked down at it, it reminded me that my constant hunger was just weakness. I was inspired. I didn't need to socialize with my dorm mates when I had a group online who understood me. Whenever I was feeling particularly weak-willed, I visited the sites for inspiration to restrict more. The next semester, during a workout with resistance bands, I noticed a squishy bump on my hip. My doctor said my intestine had protruded through my abdominal muscle, creating a hernia that was probably caused by overexercising. I needed surgery, but he requested I visit a cardiologist first. My heartbeat was 32 beats per minute. Not only did the cardiologist prohibit me from surgery, he explained that I wasn't eating enough to nourish the muscles in my heart. I protested that I felt fine. What did he know? He said that one day within the next 6 months, I would go to sleep and never wake up. I was so thin that people stared. Even to myself, I kind of looked like an alien. My skin was pale and stretched taut over my forehead. Downy hair grew from every pore in a feeble attempt to warm my face. Pale blue veins ran like rivers down my gaunt cheeks. But I was skinny, goddammit. I promised my distressed parents that I would eat more. I figured I only needed an extra 100 calories a day in order to gain back the 2 or 3 dozen pounds I'd lost. That evening, I spent an hour cooking a batch of rice pudding, and I carefully served it to myself in a small glass bowl. I slowly lowered myself into my chair, ensured that I wouldn't be distracted, and bawled. I can't do it, I blubbered. The rice pudding wasn't on my pure food list. It had too many calories. It wasn't worth gaining the weight. I should have made something else. It was going to taste like freaking shit, and then I'd be freaking out later because I could feel my bloated gut. I'd already eaten more than I wanted to because the counselor tricked me. I wanted to restrict. I wanted to find the old me again, the disciplined me. Eating this rice pudding is not worth losing myself. But I knew I had to eat it. My mom was watching, so I had to prove I wasn't sick. Tiny bite by tiny bite, I slowly finished the rice pudding by distracting myself with my computer. A couple days later, my parents called to say they would revoke my college funds unless I went to therapy. But I wasn't ready to gain weight and give up my food rituals. After crying and begging, I finally agreed to get help. They would take me out of school if I didn't go to therapy, so resisting was pointless. I want you to read this book, my new counselor said, pulling out a dog-eared paperback called Life Without Ed. All I have to do is read a book? Well, if reading is what I had to do to get everyone off my back, I'd read until I'm cross-eyed. The author, Jenny Schaefer, described her eating disorder, which she personified as Ed, and explained how she divorced him. The further I read in the book, the more I was actually okay with eating. I realized I didn't want to be like the middle-aged women in my therapy group who had given up everything just to be skinny. I wanted a career, friends, maybe even a couple pets. But most of all, I wanted relief from my anxiety. I could have a fulfilling, happy life, or I could have anorexia, not both. But my struggle wasn't over just because I decided to eat. Slowly, I reached 100 pounds. It was a bittersweet celebration. The more I ate, the more nutrients my brain received, and the more rational my thoughts became. I felt more comfortable with padding on my hips and more energy. Healthy was no longer a curse word. I met my goal weight by the end of the summer and was able to have my hernia surgery. Over several years, I learned to love my body for being strong despite going through hell. I gave up obsessing about my weight. I now have a thriving career, an amazingly supportive fiance, and 3 crazy dogs. While I still struggle with anxiety occasionally, I'm more proactive in attacking it so it doesn't get out of hand. I don't count calories anymore. I go months in between weighing myself, and I no longer have any debilitating food rituals. I still run because it reminds me of how strong I am, and in February, I ran my first marathon. I still have days when my body and my mind don't quite get along, but I know what self-destructive behavior looks like, and there's no way I want to go through that again. I'm no longer that high schooler who takes pride in being the ideal child. I feel liberated from chasing some mirage of absolute perfection. After my hernia surgery, I made myself a pink beaded bracelet that spelled out the word freedom.